Why the United Kingdom is the worst place to be if WW3 breaks out. 4:16 a.m. Your phone buzzes once, then stops like it is ashamed. The room feels normal, but the air changes anyway. A distant siren tries to start, then dies mid-note. Somewhere outside, a transformer pops, and the darkness arrives in layers. You stand at the window and realize the streetlights are gone in a perfect line, not a storm pattern, not random. Your neighbor's security lamp flickers, then gives up. The silence is the loudest sound you have ever heard. You refresh the news, and the apps hang on spinning circles. Your mobile bars drop from 5 to 1, then vanish. The Wi-Fi router shows a green light that means nothing. In that moment, you understand the UK does not go to war. It loses time first. You can live through chaos when you can move. You can survive fear when you can verify facts. But the UK is an island built on tight timing, thin margins, and crowded arteries. When WW3 begins, those margins evaporate faster here than almost anywhere. The trigger is not one explosion. It is a chain reaction of decisions made in sealed rooms. A radar contact appears where there should be open ocean. A satellite feed shows heat where there should be cold water. An operations officer uses the word credible, and the room's temperature drops. Across the Atlantic, staff switch to hardened comms. In Europe, air defense networks spike with false targets and real ones. A cyber team watches a control panel freeze, not because it is broken, but because someone wants it blind. The moment is technical, but the consequence is human. The consequence is human. In the UK, you do not get a clean announcement. You get fragments, a vague alert, a delayed broadcast, then the quiet decision from a company's server to stop trusting the internet. The information gap opens like a sinkhole under your feet. Your first problem is not missiles. It is not soldiers. It is that no one can agree on what is happening. Official channels hesitate because speaking early is dangerous. Rumors speak immediately because they do not care if they are wrong. A friend texts you that Article 5 is triggered. Another says it's a drill. Someone shares a red map with arrows over the North Sea. The map looks professional, which is how poison travels fastest. You stare at it and feel your brain searching for certainty like a starving thing. Somewhere, a cabinet meeting runs on backup power. Somewhere else, a Defense Watch officer says the words DEFCON posture change. The public never hears that line. You only feel it when the systems around you start shutting doors without explanation. The UK's danger begins with its value, not cultural value, not tourist value, operational value. The UK is a connector node, a relay point, a staging area, a listening post, and a set of runways that matter to everyone in the alliance. In a global conflict, attackers do not target places because they hate them. They target functions because they need them gone. In that cold logic, Britain is a cluster of functions tightly packed on a small map. That makes it efficient in peace and fragile in war. A runway is not just concrete. It is a timing machine for fuel, parts, medics, and aircraft cycles. A port is not just cranes and ships. It is an artery for food, medicine, spare transformers, and chemicals you never think about until they vanish. Then there are the invisible cables that land quietly along coasts. They look like nothing, which is why they are everything. They carry finance flows, shipping coordination, cloud services, and the quiet heartbeat of modern administration. If those links wobble, the country does not explode. It simply stops agreeing with itself. When systems fail in the UK, they fail close together. Dense infrastructure means one broken node pushes stress into the next node within minutes. Our instability hits water pumping. Telecom strain hits payments. Payments failing hits fuel buying. Fuel panic hits logistics. Logistics failure hits food shelves. This is why worst place is not a moral claim. It is a geometry problem. The island's compactness makes shocks propagate fast, and the narrow corridors make recovery slow. You can't root around damage easily when your routes are already crowded on a normal Tuesday. At 6:03 a.m., you go outside because your brain needs proof. You hear helicopters you cannot see. You smell diesel that shouldn't be there at dawn. People stand in clusters with phones held high, as if holding them higher will pull signal from the sky. A bus arrives late and already full. The driver looks older than yesterday. He is not smiling because smiling requires spare emotional bandwidth. At the corner shop, the card machine is down. Someone says cash only, and you realize you don't know where your cash is. The first run on supplies begins without a single missile landing. It begins the moment people believe movement is still possible. The shelves empty, not because Britain is out of food, but because households are out of trust. You walk into a supermarket that still has lighting from a backup system. The freezers hum like they are trying to stay brave. People fill baskets with water, batteries, and anything that lasts. No one looks anyone else in the eyes because eye contact makes it personal. Then the tills slow. The network is congested. Payment approvals lag. Some transactions fail. A manager whispers to a staff member who whispers to another, and you can see the moment they decide to close early for safety. The doors lock and the crowd outside becomes a pressure wave. Not violent yet, just compressed. A woman starts crying because she has a baby formula tin in her hand and no way to pay. A man offers cash, but he only has a tenner, and she needs change. The social contract begins to fray on the smallest threads first. Now you try fuel. The petrol station is already a choke point. Cars sit in a line that bends around the block like a queue for a concert, except no one is excited. The pumps are electronic locks attached to a network. When the network fails or the company freezes sales, the pump becomes a dead sculpture. A driver leans out and asks if you have heard anything. You say no, and that is the most honest answer you have ever given. Everyone is scanning, listening, trying to catch a signal from someone who sounds certain. Certainty becomes a commodity more valuable than fuel. By late morning, the government finally speaks, but the message is designed to calm, not clarify. Calm is a policy tool. Clarity is a risk. They say there is a serious international incident and increased readiness measures. Those words are clean. Your reality is not. You notice trains are delayed with no explanation, then canceled, then temporarily suspended. Rail is not just transport. It is a bloodstream for a dense island. When it slows, the country's internal mobility collapses into car corridors that cannot handle the load. The UK's geography turns panic into gridlock fast. There are only so many motorways that matter, only so many bridges and tunnels that connect key zones. A single closure on the M25 or a blocked junction on a feeder road can cascade into hours of immobility. This is where island logic flips. In older wars, water bought time. In modern war, water can trap you inside a system that depends on smooth imports. You cannot simply drive out of an island. You cannot just leave when airports, ferries, and rail terminals are also priority security zones. You think about taking a ferry, then you imagine what that looks like when everyone else has the same idea. Ferry capacity is finite on a good day. A single security lockdown turns a port into a sealed container full of people. Airports look like escape in movies. In reality, airports are paperwork, security bottlenecks, and risk exposure. In a WW3 posture, airspace restrictions can appear in minutes. Airlines can pause routes when insurance spikes. Crews can refuse flights. A closed sky does not need missiles to be effective. By afternoon, the city feels like it is holding its breath. People walk faster. Conversations are shorter. The police presence increases, not because crime has exploded, but because the state wants visible authority to prevent the idea of collapse from becoming contagious. You see soldiers near a rail hub, not in dramatic numbers, just enough to make you feel watched by history. Their faces are unreadable, because being readable is a liability. You realize the UK's strategic value is also psychological value, and psychological value invites pressure. Then the first credible strike warning leaks. Not an official alert, a screenshot of a message from someone who knows someone. It says prepare for potential disruption. That sentence spreads faster than any official broadcast ever could. This is the moment your brain tries to plan evacuation, and your body starts shaking. You picture roads full of cars, petrol stations empty, hotels booked, and strangers in rural towns watching city people arrive with panic in their eyes. Evacuation sounds clean in a sentence. In reality, evacuation is a mass choreography problem with too few exits. The UK does not have endless open corridors. It has tight funnels. When funnels clog, people do not leave. They pile up. So your choices narrow to two verbs, shelter or surge. The surge feels active, which is why it is tempting. Shelter feels passive, which is why people reject it. But in dense, brittle systems, shelter is often the smarter move. You choose your shelter space, and the decision feels ridiculous until it doesn't. You move away from windows. You pick an internal room. You pull water, snacks, and warm layers into one place. You keep shoes on because broken glass is the cheapest injury a crisis can buy. You test your torch. You find batteries. You locate a basic first aid kit you once bought and never opened. Your hands move on autopilot because your mind is busy rehearsing worst-case images it refuses to show you fully. Outside, a low rumble crosses the sky that doesn't sound like thunder. It is distant, but it has a disciplined rhythm. You realize air activity is increasing. You realize your city is not just where you live. It sits inside someone's targeting math. In modern war, strikes are not always cinematic. The first hit might be a cyber strike that freezes a SCADA panel. A grid operator watches a control system fail to respond. A breaker fails to open. A substation overheats. A cascade begins. You don't see that. You see the result. Lights blink, then die. Mobile towers switch to backup batteries that last hours, not days. Data centers throttle. Payment networks degrade. The UK, optimized for efficiency, starts shedding functions like a ship dumping cargo in a storm. ATMs stop working. Then they show out of service. It is not a cash shortage yet. It is a trust shortage. People want tangible value in their hands because screens feel like lies when networks wobble. A neighbor knocks and asks if you have candles. The question is small, almost cute, until you realize it is a probe. People are mapping resources around them, not maliciously at first, just instinctively. The social fabric is doing its own risk assessment. You try to call a relative, the call fails. You send a text. It goes through after 3 minutes, which feels like a day. The network is overloaded, not destroyed. Everyone is trying to speak at once, and the towers cannot carry that many fears simultaneously. This is the UK's second curse in a WW3 scenario: density. Billions share a small set of systems. When those systems weaken, the competition for bandwidth, fuel, food, and medical attention becomes immediate. Hospitals feel it early, not because of mass casualties at first, but because staffing collapses when transport collapses. Nurses can't reach shifts. Supply deliveries slow. Oxygen orders lag. Pharmacies run out of routine meds because the last mile breaks under traffic and confusion. You watch an ambulance stuck behind a line of cars that refuses to part, not because drivers are cruel, because they are frozen, because no one trusts anyone else to make the first move. Even courtesy becomes risky in an atmosphere thick with uncertainty. Then the sound changes. Sirens become more frequent. Helicopters become constant. Somewhere a fire burns and no one knows why. Smoke rises and becomes a rumor generator. People start saying, "It was a strike." Others say, "It was looting." Both stories feel true because fear does not require evidence. You check official updates. They are slow and carefully worded. You check social media. It is fast and full of fantasy. Information at this moment is poison disguised as clarity. The only safe rule is the two-source rule, and even that feels fragile. The UK's third curse is its logistics dependence. Food, fuel, and components arrive on schedules that are invisible until they stop. Supermarkets don't hold deep storage. They hold flow. When flow breaks, shelves empty fast, and the emptiness looks like doom, even when warehouses still exist. Fuel is the same. The moment people believe there will be rationing, they create it. They top off. They hoard. They fill jerrycans. They drive extra miles just in case. The shortage becomes self-made, then self-reinforcing. Waste collection slows because drivers can't get fuel, or routes are restricted, or staff stay home. Rubbish piles up. Rats appear. That sounds trivial until you remember disease does not care about geopolitics. Public health failures are how crises become long wars against your own environment. By day 2, the UK begins to look like a map of priorities. Some areas stay powered because they sit near critical infrastructure. Other areas go dark for hours in rolling patterns. People learn quickly that protected does not mean safe. It means useful. You hear a new vocabulary in public speech: rationing, priority access, restricted zones, temporary controls, emergency powers. These words are administrative, but they land like stones in your stomach. The state starts controlling movement around ports, bases, and key substations. Not because it wants to punish you, but because it needs roads for supply convoys and responders. The moment you realize your freedom of movement is negotiable, you understand how fast a modern society can shift posture. Crowds begin to separate into types. The prepared become quiet. They stop talking about their supplies. The unprepared become louder, not because they are bad people, but because panic is a volume problem. The loudest stories get believed. Small frictions turn into arguments. Someone accuses someone of hoarding. Someone else demands fairness from a system that cannot deliver fairness when trucks cannot move. Police try to mediate, but they are stretched thin, and they also have families. This is where the UK's compactness becomes suffocating. In a sprawling country, people can disperse. In Britain, dispersal still funnels through the same nodes. You can drive out of London, but you drive into someone else's bottleneck. London in particular becomes a multiplier of every failure. A payment slowdown becomes a mass problem because so many rely on contactless. A tube closure becomes a medical staffing problem. A power dip becomes a water pumping problem. High rises become traps when lifts stop and stairwells fill. You realize how vertical living changes survival math. Carrying water upstairs becomes a daily labor. Elderly neighbors become isolated. Fire risk increases because people improvise heat and light. A small kitchen accident becomes a major incident when response times lengthen. Meanwhile, the geopolitical layer continues above your head like weather you cannot see. NATO meetings happen behind closed doors. Retaliatory decisions are made in silence. Public statements are shaped to deter, not to inform. You are living inside a strategic theater while trying to boil water. You hear the word hypersonic on the radio, and it makes your mouth dry. Hypersonic means time collapses. It means warning windows shrink. It means decisions are made faster than public comprehension can catch up. Missile defense exists, but it is not a magic dome. Defenders prioritize. They protect capitals, bases, and key nodes. They cannot protect every street, every school, every block of flats. Even successful intercepts can rain debris. Even safe zones can become unsafe through cascading failures. So you adapt to a new normal that is not stable, but repetitive. You wait to check water pressure. You charge devices during known power windows. You cook simple meals. You keep documents together. You keep a bag ready because instructions can change fast. You learn to treat crowds like hazards. Not because people are enemies, but because crowds are physics. Crowds create accidents. Crowds block roads. Crowds amplify fear. The safest move is often to not become part of the wave. Your neighborhood becomes a microstate of favors and boundaries. One person shares a radio, another shares a stove. Someone organizes a check-in list for vulnerable residents. Community becomes survival technology when official capacity is stretched. But community has limits when supplies thin and rumors sharpen. Someone claims a convoy is coming. Someone else claims the convoy was attacked. Both claims spread because the human brain hates uncertainty more than it hates bad news. By day 5, exhaustion arrives. The emotional curve becomes predictable. Disbelief becomes frantic checking. Frantic checking becomes fatigue. Fatigue becomes adaptation. You stop waiting for normal to return, and you start living inside the new rhythm. You also begin to understand the UK's deepest vulnerability, and W3 is not a single strike. It is compounded brittleness. High strategic value invites pressure. Dense systems amplify disruption. Narrow corridors choke movement. Thin buffers turn short interruptions into visible scarcity.